What's up, gang? Welcome to The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Elatia. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So, come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Elatia, and boy, do we have a special guest. Elatia Abate is in the house. What's up, Elatia?
What's up? How are you? I'm so glad to be here.
Oh my God, I'm so pumped. Can I ask you a question, Elatia? I don't even know if I asked you this when I first met you. Can I ask you a personal question?
Absolutely. This is what we're here for.
What is the background on your name? I've never heard that name before.
Yeah, so Elatia, my father is a musician, and he was elated to see me when I got here, and he wanted a name that was melodic, and so there we are. Elatia sort of sits at this intersection of possibility and joy.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. It was, and your mom was just like, I'm down. Like,
yeah, why not? We'll just roll with it.
That's so cool. And what is the last name? What's the heritage on that?
Italian.
Oh, all right. Are you full or half Italian?
Half.
All
So
right,
we'll say, and actually, if I must say this, my great grandfather would say, "We're not Italian, we're Sicilian." So there's
yeah, he would.
Yes,
my
he
stepdad
would, right?
is Sicilian. That's how you guys. That's how they roll.
That's the role of the situation. So now that we've got that clear, everything else is golden. But
it's all good.
The foundation is locked. We're good to go.
That's pretty cool. So well, names say a lot. So I'm half Italian. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that. I don't think we covered that in the first time that we met.
No. We so the audience knows I'm selfish. So I like they're just here. They come along for the ride. So the show's about AI. We're gonna be talking about a bunch of cool AI stuff and consciousness. But I had so I'll give some background. But we're gonna talk some Italian heritage. So my mom is full Italian. Like my middle name is John, which is from my grandfather, who's from Italy, born in like northern Italy.
Amazing.
His name was John Lutti, and my mom's maiden name is Francia, and her mother's maiden name is Mandarino. So
I love it.
Yeah, so I come from a long line. Even though I'm like my name's very Persian, I actually grew up kind of Italian American because my dad was Persian, but my mom and my grandparents were all Italian. Yeah. So I grew up like eating like Sunday like gravy and like homemade gnocchi, and like we have a 100-year-old sauce recipe in my family.
Yeah. It makes a difference. For me, it was, although there's a rich background to my whole family, the growing up was very culturally Italian, and that, till this day, I recognize the ways in which that shapes how I show up for things, what are the most important things to me, and sort of how I guide and live the way that I do.
So what's interesting is you'll appreciate this because you're Italiano, is I'd say Persians, because I'm Italian. This is my reference point. I think Persians are the Italians of the Middle East. So I got double fucked, like hardcore Italian, hardcore Persian.
Double blessed, as one might say, from another flip of that coin.
I was at MIT at this entrepreneurial education program, and there was this guy from Italy that came. He was this very successful entrepreneur, had built like a huge company out of Italy, and he said something, and I was like, "This is why I said double fuck." He's like, "There's a saying in Italy: revenge is sweet in the heart of the Italian." And I was like, "It must be sweet in the heart of the Iranian too."
salty, sweet, yeah.
So I was like, my mom holds a grudge like you've never seen. I'm like, Mom, it's like, it's not even healthy to have that big of a grudge. I mean, it really is. Revenge is sweet in the heart of the Italian. But anyway, so audience, I met Elatia through a great friend of mine, Raquel, And you guys know each other through Tony Robbins' Platinum program. Is that correct?
Tony Robbins Platinum, and then subsequently through Body-Centered Leadership with John and Christina Amaral, which will be central to the conversation as we move it down the road. So
that's right. So we were introduced. We were supposed to have dinner, the three of us in Austin, because you were here for South by. Doing a talk on the consciousness of AI. Raquel got stuck in LA, and I'm like, I hit her up. I'm like, hey, do you think I should still have dinner with Raquel, with Elatia? And she's like, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? She starts giving me shit, and I'm like, okay, I don't know, I just don't want it to be weird. She's like, it's only be, and she said this, you don't know this. She said, it's only gonna be weird if you make it weird. Now she's spicy.
And tell the people, it was amazing.
It was, dude. It was really, it was totally amazing. We had a great dinner, got to get to know each other, and got to learn a lot about the work that Elatia's doing. And I was like, man, do you want to come on my podcast? And she's so gracious to grace us here today. So super pumped to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so stoked to be here. And I've been waiting for this conversation because so much of what we talked about when we were together not only has shaped some thinking, but I've actually been able to take a lot of how you show up in the world and deliver it to my clients. And so I'm excited that we get to continue this conversation here for other people to hear the kinds of stuff we get to talk about.
Without question. And it's so funny because AI, the world of AI and consciousness for that matter are moving around so fast. Like, I think I saw you in March, and I feel like the world's like changed even a lot since then.
Only a million, only almost imperceptible. Like it's insane.
It's wild. So I'm going to give do you mind if I do your formal bio and then here at the...
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right.
It's kind of weird. It's sort of like, and then...
Yeah, no. It's you know, like the audience knows that I move quick on this stuff because they really want to get to the meat and potatoes of like the work you're doing. But you guys, Elatia is an actual badass, founder and CEO of the Future of Now, named a Forbes leading female futurist in residence at Paylocity, and creator of the Future-Led Leadership, instructor at Stanford University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and LinkedIn Learning, and member of the American Society of AI. So she's doing a lot of amazing work in the world of AI. And it was, I would love if, obviously AI is a new topic. You, I know, do a lot of strategy work with the really profound organizations. You're obviously working with some really big universities, but I know we don't just end up in these spots. If you wouldn't mind, give our audience a little bit of your background. How did you get to where you got to?
Yeah, the short answer is it was a total fluke. I left the corporate world just about 10 years ago now, initially to solve for the problem that most of the planet finds themselves unhappy at work. I created a whole solution around that, and by chance, or not so by chance, went to a Tony Robbins conference, the business mastery space, to figure out or to decide for myself, like, how did I want to scale this? What did I want to do? How might I be able to bring it into the world in more meaningful ways? And onto the stage in August 2016 jumps Peter Diamandis, one of the world's foremost futurists. And he starts talking about self-driving trucks, the tech behind them, and how they're going to change the world. And on the one hand, I was like, cool, like I see the abundance, I see what's going to happen. And on the other hand, I was like, wait, but what are we going to do with all the people? Because I started to think, okay, so if the truck drivers are going to lose their jobs and the mom and pop gas stations and the diners, like what is actually going to happen? And I'm born and raised in Detroit. And so I did live through what happened when we don't think preemptively about the impact of technology and work in our working world. And so I just started to dig into the data. What's the impact of tech? What tech is being created? What happens in economies during industrial revolutions? What does it mean that our workforce population is both doing more gig work and their life expectancy is expanding? What are these things going to mean for the future of work? And from that point forward, I've dedicated my career and life to answering the central question of the future of work, which is how might we empower our success in the face of great uncertainty and disruption?
So let me ask a question. Number one, I didn't realize that you were a Detroit person. What part?
For those who are listening,
where in Detroit did you grow up? What part?
The Old Tiger. So about 3/4 of a mile from the Old Tiger Stadium downtown. So Michigan, Trumbull to what? So between the Old Tiger Stadium and Wayne State University, for those who know the area.
So hold on, so I almost bought a company in Detroit 13 years ago, and so I had to go there a bunch of times. And they took me to the Detroit Athletic Club. Is that
Yep.
is it right near there?
It is, that is a little bit further from, so we'll call that maybe 2 miles from where I grew up. But yeah, really close there downtown.
You grew up, like that's downtown Detroit, just for
Yeah, I grew
listeners.
up in Detroit proper, and I grew up in the neighborhood that I grew up. On the one hand, it was a total dichotomy. It was there were families who had wonderful community organizations. It was like hippie times, right? So had wonderful community organizations where families took care of other people's kids, and it was a real investment in how we were growing up. And there was a crack house on the corner and an abandoned house across the street, and the projects are right there. And so the dichotomy of, on the one hand, safety within a tighter community, but really intense living in the inner city of Detroit at a time when Detroit was a challenging place to be.
Yeah, no, it got crushed because of what happened to all the auto manufacturers in like the 80s and 90s.
So this is exactly that. Why for me it's so important to especially bring the human element to these conversations around the future of work and how we want to navigate what's happening now.
Yeah, for listeners that, like, we got younger listeners and people that want to not relate to what I'm saying, do yourself a favor. Go and look at like videos of Detroit in like the 1950s and 60s. Just like to see what like a thriving city. It was like the Chicago of like, it was probably bigger than Chicago, I would assume, or like on
I don't
par.
remember population-wise, but it was a booming metropolis.
Total booming. It was probably like what Austin is now, where I live, right?
Yeah.
Like this thriving city. And then it's doing better now because of Dan Gilbert and the folks at Rocket. And it's become like they've revitalized it. There's been a lot of money that's gone into downtown Detroit, but it's amazing. And one of the most interesting things that I've seen with it is you just drive. I ended up spending a lot of time in Detroit for two reasons. Number one is I tried buying that business, and then I ended up actually. When I was there, I would sleep either near the airport in downtown Detroit, which is not that great, or I would sleep in Troy, Michigan, which is okay. It's like a suburb, right? And so fast forward to, this was like 2012. Fast forward 2017, I end up recruiting a former guest on the show, Barbara Yolis, who was the CMO of a massive company, which is now based out of Pontiac, called United Wholesale Mortgage.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So Matt Ishbia, his company, and this guy, he owns the Phoenix Suns. For people that don't know what I'm talking about, billionaire, like big deal, right? This was, by the way, none of this was true in 2016 or 15 or 12.
Isn't that funny how that works? It's like,
yeah, and Rocket Mortgage these are number one and number two mortgage lenders in the United States, both publicly traded companies, and they've revitalized Detroit essentially. They've been a big part of it, and I end up staying in Birmingham, Michigan. And so I remember
at the Townsend, okay.
So I started staying at the Townsend every time I went, and I was looking forward to going. I was like, oh, I can't wait to go to. I went up there in May. For anyone if you ever want to go to Michigan, go to Birmingham, Michigan in May anytime, and you'll be like, it's beautiful, it's amazing, it's very luxurious. I did that, and I was like, oh, I understand why people live here now. But I'm also Persian, and we like that sort of stuff, right?
Totally. And for me, it's being there and in that environment. So my father, I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, he's a musician. And so I grew up in the music scene, from a very, very, very young age there. And so for me, Detroit it's the factories, it's the music, it's the people, it's the culture, it's the possibility and the hope for, humanity and our ability and capacity to expand, that every time I set foot, walk off the plane, I'm like, okay, here we are. This is where the center of the conversation is.
Yeah, I love that. So that's, I didn't realize that was your background. Where did you do undergrad at?
I did my undergrad at the University of Chicago, and that was a blessing. Another sort of these fluke moments, but my mom's boss's son was like, hey, I'm applying to law school here. I think, Elatia's kind of weird. She might like Chicago undergrad. And for me, it was such a gift because it's extremely academically rigorous.
Yeah.
And it was a place where you could go, and on a Saturday night, you could go to a club, you could go to a frat house, you could be in the library, and basically nobody cared what you were up to. And so that translated to me to a sense of freedom of being that allowed me to explore and learn and expand myself.
I love that. And so did you always consider yourself a person that was like leaning into the future, or was that like, were you an ideator? Like, what got you into becoming a futurist?
Yeah. So if you look back over, I've always been someone who likes to try things, who likes to build things, who likes to invent stuff, who will, I was the kind of kid who, if I got a toy that needed to be assembled, I would take it out of the box and build it without looking at the instructions.
Oh.
And so I'm not, and be like, oh, what were these screws actually important? Did we need this? But I've always been sort of inventive. And then I will say, and I must give a nod since we're doing this sort of real origin story, to my high school drama teacher who gave me the gift of an introduction to improv theater and how to completely dance with the unknown and to use that as a source of empowerment. And so if I had to say, I mean, of course, growing up in Detroit and needing to be scrappy and living in a world that where not a lot was given to you, that combined with the beauty of the gift of improv comedy really set me up for this world of futurist and being able to dance with innovation and disruption.
Did you go to public school?
I did. Yeah. I went to a public school in Detroit that was called Golightly Educational Center. Oh, I love that I get to shout out all these wonderful places. And all of my friends from there and the teachers who shaped me. Yeah, I went to a school called Golightly Educational Center, which was at the time sort of a magnet school for the arts in the city. And so in addition to traditional, math, science, English kind of teaching, we had access to music and theater and all these wonderful things. So there was also a juxtaposition in that, which was we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but the opportunities that were afforded through a school like this, again, it opens you up to possibility. It helps your brain form in ways that you look for what can be built as opposed to what's wrong.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny when you're just describing how I'm like that. I don't ever read the instructions. I just like start like we have that in common.
Why would you bother if you could just get to the business of doing the thing? It feels like...
Yeah, and if it's too complicated, I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'll outsource it. But I normally don't read instructions. I do try to figure it out by myself. That's interesting. The reason I asked is as part of my experience of spending a lot of time in Detroit was the woman who worked for me. Her kids all went to Cranbrook.
Oh yeah.
I did like a private tour of Cranbrook, and that's an amazing institution there. And then they have all this like mid-century modern like design stuff. It's really cool. It's really cool. Anyway, I digress. So you did learning there. Did you end up you got your MBA from University of Chicago as well? Is that correct?
Also from Chicago. Yeah, that was one of those things. Life continues to give us gifts if we're willing to be open to them. And I was living in Brazil running a foundation, and in the role of that foundation, which was finding and selecting amazingly talented Brazilian students to give them scholarships to go to the world's best schools, in that role, it was my job to host the deans of the world's most prominent business schools when they came down to Brazil to visit. And so the dean of Chicago came, and his name is Ted Snyder at the time, and we got stuck in traffic together for a few hours. I was taking him from one side of the city to the other. And he's like, hey, have you thought about business school? I said, yes, but I don't want to go to Chicago. And he's like, all right. But through the being stuck in traffic and the conversation, he asked me what I valued most about my undergrad, which was not that I graduated knowing everything, but that I graduated with the confidence that, especially if I didn't know the answer to something, I have the tools to be able to get to an answer somehow through my own intellect and through collaborating and connecting with other people. And he was like, well, this is just what we hope that everybody gets out of an experience at Booth. And I said, well, at the time it was a GSB, it was at Booth. Great. And that was what sold me. I went back to Chicago for B school.
Was it called Booth then? Or it
was not. It became called Booth literally between my first and second year.
Yeah, because the founder at DFA, that's where he studied. I know there's a big, like, especially in the world I've been just playing in wealth management. There's a lot of like chest puffing around. Did you go to Booth or not? Just because of DFA's prominence there. Do they do a lot of behavioral economics there as well? Is that it?
There's a lot of wonderful behavioral economics. Nicholas, I love that I get to. This is just such a great opportunity to share all the people who shape thinking and positive action in the world. Nicholas Epley is an amazing person, and I must say, Harry Davis, who was a marketing professor for a long time, and then shifted over into space of leadership and leadership development, really anchored into this, not just the behavioral piece, but who do you as a human being need to be and become in order to thrive in the world in the way that you want to? And that was another moment for me that shifted dramatically what was possible for my life.
Wait, so I'd love to double click on that. Like, what was your biggest learning around, like, who, like, A, the framework of deciding who you need to be, and B, like, what is your belief around that?
Yeah. So Harry had this class called business policy. So it sounds very official, and it's like strategy and business and human development. That's sort of the syllabus umbrella. But when you get into it, essentially it was a class that said, okay, this is kind of your last stop before you leave business school. What kind of a human being do you want to be when you leave here? And what do you want to commit to delivering in the world once you're out there? And that to me was an invitation to really explore that, and to get down to the business of what does my humanity mean as a leader, with some sense of responsibility, with some sense of a desire to create positive impacts. And the greatest learning from that for me was there were a couple, but one is it's the journey, not the destination. And second, that was an entree into work and learning around Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. This notion that we must be willing to give up the life that we have planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. And that gives an absolute sense of freedom and unlocking of potential if you can allow yourself to sit in the power of it.
Was that a big part of the curriculum? Was the Joseph Campbell's work?
A big part of the work was various explorations into which is more important. Is it the goal? Is it the achievement of the thing? Or is it the who we become in the doing of the thing? And Joseph Campbell, of course, is like the gold standard of measuring that. But Harry brought us, various strategic thinkers and mythological thinkers and business strategists to essentially explore that same question.
It's so interesting because if you look at I think that if you lined up 100 people who have some emotional intelligence, they'd probably tell you it's who do you become in the process, right?
That's it.
Like I think most people who are like conscious and awakened, which is not most people, but let's just say the people that are like that, I think that's the answer you're going to get, right?
Yeah,
but
it's becoming in the way to or through the thing, which of course is so much of the hero's journey. Like the only way out is moving through.
Right, but if we look at economic systems and capitalism and how it's designed, that's not how it's ran.
Well, right, it's outcome focused,
right,
and specifically measurable outcome focused that must be leaning toward growth.
Right. And so what's interesting is, like, I'm a conscious capitalist. So my belief strongly is if you get everyone who's focused on who they're becoming to become better in the process of becoming what they're supposed to be and focused on that you end up with these outsized economic returns because people are driven by purpose, not by fear or anxiety or, I don't want to lose my job or, I don't want boss to be mad at me, but they're really like there with their heart and soul. And when I used to have a saying in my former business, and I don't even think we talked about this, but like I had a 1,000-person organization, and I'm like, look, no matter what I do, I can't pay people to actually care. I could pay them to do work, but like there's no dollar amount that will make them actually care in the long run. They have to care because they're growing as a part of something greater than themselves, and that's around purpose. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. So the thought first is yes. And then I believe I've come to see as we move through it, there are infinite ways to navigate life. And some can be more transactional. And in many ways, particularly in our Western society, life is organized so that we are transactional in order to get some maximum or optimized benefit from something. But and particularly as we're moving to and move through this age of AI that we're living in right now, that transactional scarcity based, which is false, by the way, but that false construct of scarcity is what drives so much of what is not only frustrating people, but what is going to create so many more challenges for society along the way.
So when we look at, and this is, I think, a good kind of turning point. And your background is in how do you build better organizations, and strategically, how do you approach that, and what's the future of work? And when we start talking about the future of work, and we talk about the transactional nature of capitalism, and then we look at this little thing that's like bubbling up that does work for us without the need for it almost creates a transaction itself. AI is doing the work that we can do faster in some ways now, and I think that every week things that didn't work now work in a way that where I, as a human, can do more. I don't know if you've come across I think it was called Project 2027, or there's this have you seen this thing where this AI futurist who predicted where we would be today is saying this is where the 3 different outcomes of where we're going to be by 2027, and where AI is smarter. I think Sam Altman, the founder of ChatGPT, was saying, I want to live in a world where the computer is smarter than all my kids, right? And so but let's just say that we're at this precipice of a 2027, 2028, 2029, where we have 7.8 billion people on this planet. I am seeing it straight up right now. I am a living proof of this as we speak, where I am going to be building some new companies in the fall. And I'm like, I don't want to hire anybody. Literally, and listen, I'm a person where I've always, my go-to is to hire people. And I'm like, I'm not hiring anybody. I'm like, I don't want to, I actually want a business. There's a guy on LinkedIn right now that's bragging about building a $30 million ARR business with just 3 founders and all agentic AI, right? So we're in this world now where 6% of the population, yourself and myself are probably part of that 6% of the population who are good at being entrepreneurs, are like, I don't want to have any employees. Mm-hmm. I'm like, if that's the mindset, I just view myself. I love, by the way, building awesome teams and great cultures and all this stuff, but I'm like, I'm not hiring anybody. If I'm feeling that way because I think AI is going to get there faster than my need to hire people is, what does that mean? What is that going to look like for the workforce if 5 years from now, in your mind?
So I think that that's such a big and important question, and I think it's useful to break it down into some of its subcomponents, or at least some of those subcomponents in terms of how I evaluate it, right? So there's sort of the startup culture, and then there's large existing organizations, and then there's the broader societal context, right? What does this mean for the future of humanity and the planet? So from the startup space, if one were starting from scratch and or if one were in the bucket of 1 to 20 ARR million, much more interesting questions are, how do I do it without people? And or how do I do it with a minimized headcount?
Right.
Such that I don't need to, traditionally you might scale as you go from 1 to 10, from 10 to 50, and then on. The quantity of people who you would need, you could actually keep at a threshold of under 50 people.
Right.
So that becomes the game of how you enable that if you're sitting in a startup world. If you're sitting but most of the world is not employed in the startup space. They might be employed in small to medium business and or enterprise, but the startup specifically is a smaller portion of that. But we're talking about existing organizations. This is where a notion that I call stackable factory comes into play. And so the analogies for people to get their brains around it is okay, back in the second industrial revolution, when the assembly line came online, the assembly line was essentially human beings who used tools to build stuff. And then as technology evolved, now assembly lines are basically robots guided by human beings to build more or less the same stuff. Okay, now, and I call it stackable factory just because I envision the skyscraper in the world. We are at a precipice of that. Up until now, knowledge workers have used SaaS and other software tools to get their knowledge work out into the world. Now we are at the precipice / getting into a deeper version of it, where it is essentially machine intelligence guided by human ingenuity to produce that same thing. And so the kind of job compression, I'll call it, that we saw in the assembly line and the displacement of workers is what we are going to see at scale in white collar work. But and this is the biggest difference, is that the economics are making sense a lot faster.
Right.
And so the lag around adoption because of cost, or the lag around adoption because of challenges to change in business process, is significantly reduced because it's pretty easy. And so this is where I think the biggest disruption in the marketplace is. And then that leads to the third bucket, which is, what does this mean for future of work? So I consider the central question of the future of work to be, how might we empower our success in the face of great uncertainty and disruption that has no foreseeable end? And that broader question now asks us, okay, if we have shift at scale of employment or not so much employment, how is it that we not only upskill and reskill, but perhaps completely reform, remember, reconstruct what it is to what is work and working, what is the economy, and how we help people thrive?
So I guess a follow-up question on that is, and so we had some gentlemen who I told you about, who Joshua Pellisier and Peter Kobabe on the show, and these guys are kind of building institutions to teach AIFI institutions for companies, right? And if we say 89% of the United States economy are SMBs, right? These are small to medium businesses. I know that that's a broad, that doesn't mean like little mom and pop shops necessarily, but most of them are small businesses. When you look at that, and you look at what you're talking about, and the key to, I think, everything you just said is the velocity of change. Yes. And the simplicity of change is different than what we've seen through SaaS tool rollouts, yes. Automation of yep. robotics and assembly lines. These are things that took either medium to large capital investments to make those changes happening. And then I have to have a team of people to go implement it, so on and so forth. I'll use myself as an example, using ChatGPT 03, and I was like, hey, I want you to go online. I want you to find 50 CEOs that have XYZ in these markets, that have recession-proof businesses. I want you to pull the data sets for me, scrub it against this, give me all their emails, and it took them an hour. And it would have taken, if I had an analyst, or let's just say I had an executive assistant who's really skilled at searching for stuff, that would have taken him 3 days to do that work.
Yeah.
And it took chat. I think it maybe took less. I think it took an hour. Let's call it 2. Even if it took a day, that's
still 1/3 of the time that it would have taken otherwise. If you
and oh, by the way, I had it doing 4 other projects. I had it write a first draft of a book that I'm working on while it was doing that. Now it was hallucinating like crazy and lying to me, which that's a whole different conversation. Yeah. I love that it lied to me. I was like, I'll have it to you by 6, and wouldn't give it to me. I'm like, do you actually understand what time is? And chat said to me, I don't understand the concept of time, which I thought was interesting. I said, well, I can't wait till you do. But we have this world where someone like a Darius, and there's plenty of Dariuses out there, maybe not as cool as I am, but there are plenty.
Obviously not.
Who are going to think to themselves, hey, I could get 5x the productivity out of my analyst that I could have got before. Oh, I don't even need an analyst anymore. Chat is agentic enough. Let's talk a year from now. It's agentic enough to do the work of an analyst. Maybe it's not even a year from now. So I'm in private equity. I'm like, oh, well, like I have a deal I'm looking at right now, Elatia, where it's a roofing company, at $15 million of revenue. The CEO is a guy I've mentored for a long time, and he wants to do roll-ups. And I said, hey, let me buy a piece of your company. we're going to AIify your entire chassis of your business. We will make your team you'll get more scale out of the business team you have there. People who want to get on the board for this will be super productive. We can pay them more. The people that don't get on board, we're not going to need them. So we'll have to let them go. And then we're going to go buy companies. And by the way, that's a business that roofing business typically does 15 to 20% margin business. I think I could double that simply because I'm literally cutting the expense of the back office in half at scale. And then I'm going to go buy $1 to $2 million roofing businesses and literally do the same thing to every single one of those. Right. So I think you're going to see this with smart operators. You're going to see it with folks like me that are in private equity. And this is happening. No questions about it. So if that's what's going to happen, and it's going to happen at a pretty quick velocity over the next, couple years, we're going to your point, we're going to have a huge displaced workforce. Right. I don't have, when I think of that, I'm like, I don't have an answer for what they'll be doing. Now people are like, oh, well, Darius, there's going to be new industries that don't exist today. And I'm like, I would agree with that if the velocity of it wasn't so quick. But my perspective is the velocity is too fast. So you're not going to be able to create new jobs and new industries fast enough for that big of a displacement. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So correct. And this is why I think it's also important and useful to start to break down the thinking around this between, so in order to get to the state that you're talking about, which is AIFI, managed services businesses and service provider businesses and all these things, there is an interim, shorter or longer, depending on the complexity of the business. But there is an interim period in which you're making a transition from, we'll call it 100% analog-ish, right, to completely AIified. And so those who can work and guide and understand enough about what's going on to guide this transition through are going to be incredibly successful. And so you've rightly named what this kind of opportunity is and what it can look like as you walk through the transition of this particular business. And there is a velocity and volume component around all of this, which leads to these broader social questions, because the immediate answer is not upskill, reskill, because there is not a one-to-one or one to even a few job recreation on this other side. And even if there were, the data tell us today that the big differential, so I gave the comparison of the second industrial revolution to the world that we're living in now. At the time of the second industrial revolution, one only needed a 5th grade education in order to take advantage of the new jobs that are being created. The new jobs that are being created now are massively more sophisticated. And so they require, and I won't say a college degree or more, but I will call it an equivalent of a college degree or more, because also if you're paying attention, you don't actually need college degree in order to have access to these really high paying jobs that are here and exist. But the gap that's sitting there must be analyzed, I believe, must be analyzed through the lens of initiatives like universal basic income and otherwise, because the gap is too great. And the social risk, which means then, to transfer to the business world, the business risk is so enormous that if we don't help people make this transition, there is a risk of societal crumble. And when I say societal crumble, I mean, massive civil unrest that if we don't handle it is a real material risk. And that is, in fact, one of the reasons that got me so interested and fascinated in this work around the future of work is that, in the US at the time when I started doing this, truck drivers were like 90, we'll call it 95+% male. And what happens in a country, and sociologically there's research behind this, but if you take away from men their status and their strength and don't provide a substitute in a country where people are loaded with guns, this does not bode well for our peaceful society, for our ability to have businesses that are growing, for our ability to have a community that's connected. And so these are the reasons why it's critically important. And if you want to frame it in a context of what I call the future of work, if you can understand the paradigm shifts that are happening, this is what's critical. So if we're moving away from a world of or and into a world of and. So in the world of or, there was separation. What I do over here has no impact over there, or I'm not particularly interested in it because the market will self-correct. Now, if we're having massive layoffs at scale and there is no free market recoup of this, there is impact that's going to create a business environment that's so adverse that it behooves us to create what some might call more social or socialized solutions in order so that the whole thing thrives.
Yeah. So if you have, so using what you just said, like if you have an environment, I pick a number of like, call it 30% of the population is not like, doesn't have work, right?
Sure.
Like, and that's a big enough number where like right now we're at 3% unemployment, 4% unemployment, whatever that number is, like 10x, right? Like, yeah, that's problematic. Like, that's not great. I still like UBI. I don't think solves the problem of people waking up and having purpose in their lives. But like, I thought about it though. I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, maybe that there's like, you start to think about education and coaching and like people like pouring into their kids and like being a part of their communities. Like these are jobs that have been like really like cannibalized and like scraped away, and people don't do that now. Men are not doing that like they did before because it didn't pay well enough. And you could probably redistribute resources in a way where people can spend more time with their kids and they can be more involved in their community, and every dad can coach their kid because they don't have to do a job. And the one thing that I thought of I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, if we live in a world, you'd have to build an incentive structure from taxation or some sort of, so this has to happen at the government level. And I know, like, I don't like to pay taxes like anybody else doesn't want to pay taxes. But the reality is if 6% of the population is skilled to take advantage of this, which is what I believe. I believe if you're an entrepreneur, this is like freaking platinum age to be an entrepreneur. If you're a good entrepreneur, like, there's never been a better time. Yeah. Because you could create so much so fast, and you're in a position to do it where others are not good at doing it, right? But that's not great for the other 94% of the population. And so, if we do live in this world where you have essentially agentic AI and automation and robotics that are at a level nearly close to sentient thinking, singularity, if you will, you essentially have an economy that can run 24/7 with way less overhead built into it, which means that you have way more like production. Like, wouldn't GDP go up? Wouldn't there be this like ultimate abundance? Forgetting about the redistribution of wealth, just the creation of things. Wouldn't it? I don't have to do my taxes. I don't have to pay my bills. I don't have to, like, an agentic AI just does all this stuff for me. I don't have to waste any time filling out paperwork. Like, there's no one sitting there checking me in for the doctors because there's no need for that. I just go and they know who I am, right? Yeah. Like, there's all this waste of like transactional behavior for double checking the checker who's checking the checker that no longer is important anymore. And so we've cut all this waste. Everything's automated. GDP would go up, I would assume. Maybe people, but then the question is, how do you reallocate resources? Are you suggesting through government, society, like socialism? I don't want to use that word and have it be thought of the wrong way. But if people get UBI and they're given the abundance through government, through a distribution mechanism that works, that could lower the temperature of from an unrest perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
So I would offer that a way to think about that can sit inside one of the paradigm shifts that's occurring as relates to the future of work, which is we're moving away from a world of scarcity, right? As economists would define that, limited resources and unlimited demand for those resources, into a world of abundance, which by many populations, particularly Indigenous and First Nations people, has already always been true, which is that there are some needs with almost infinite resources to be able to meet those, or certainly those to be able to meet the actual needs that exist today. And what this offers us, or if we were to make a shift from or contemplate what it looks like to move away from a model of Milton Friedman and the business of business is business to the business of business is generating value in a broader context. And this model is brought from Riane Eisler's work, which is there's a book that she wrote called The Real Wealth of Nations that describes the economy not just in the three buckets that traditional economists would define it. So traditional economists would say that there's the market economy, the government economy, and the illegal economy. And that's essentially what underpins how we drive the world. But her definition of that expands it to look at the value of community economy, to look at the value of unpaid labor, and to look at the value of the environment. And so, just imagine a world where a balance sheet of one of the many natural resource driven companies, any of the oil companies, for example, that the oil that they are able to sell out in the marketplace isn't just a product that they then sell at margin, but it actually has a cost to the balance sheet, and what that might shift the world to be and to look like, and how we might begin to contemplate what value and what business means in relation to those kinds of things. And so I would offer that the more interesting questions lie in reshaping how we think about how value is created. And of course, over time, there have been analogous and or sort of like marginally related ways of thinking about it. This is how we got to the B Corp. This is how we got to these other kinds of organizations. I think we need to go much further than that, but this is a way to sort of help think about the shift. And there's a great book that a woman named Judy Samuelson wrote. She's out of the Aspen Institute, and it's called The 6 New Rules of Business. And essentially she walks us through older economy, and I'll just pull like the Milton Friedman, because this is all pulled from like squeezing as much value as we can for shareholders out into what the new economy looks like. Is wonderful data inside this book. And she offers a real model for how we move from a thinking about and operationalizing business from solely shareholder or stockholder value into this broader definition.
Yeah, so I mean, I've heard that called stakeholder value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have the different stakeholders involved. It's funny when you use the Exxon Mobil or like someone pulling oil out of the ocean, and it's like in the past, and regulation tries to fix some of this. Is like if you spilled some oil in the process, there was no like bill you got for the mess you just made, for the damage you did. It was just like, yep, look, business as usual. Right. Yeah. And you have like unregulated cities like Houston, Texas, where, when a flood happens, like we end up paying higher insurance rates because they didn't have good zoning, and they basically built a big bowl that filled up with water when we had a huge hurricane. Right. And there's trillions or, billions and billions of dollars of damage. So I do think that, to your point, there needs to be a reshaping of the economy. So it's not just like, a market economy and there we could go down this rabbit hole where it's like, yeah, that happens, and then the insurance companies go out of business. They don't even pay for the damage that they insured, right? And so we see, like, I do think that this will probably force the hand of, I guess, if we are talking free market economics, like this will force a reshaping of the economy. It may be painful to get there,
which is the real invitation, I think, of the moment that we're living in now, and not only reshaping of the economy, but a reshaping of how we have structured Western capitalist economy. And again, I am pro entrepreneur. I am a conscious capitalist in how we build businesses and how we do these things. So to be really clear about that distinction. However, it's simply the system is simply not sustainable as it stands.
Right.
Because what we do over here does impact over there. That oopsie oil spill doesn't just impact horribly the natural life and the resources that are here and the fishermen's and others' ability to make a living, but also all of the economies around it, right? So it has this impact that isn't just an environmental impact, but it shows us very clearly that all of these things are interconnected. And so the much more interesting questions, even though they demand of us more time, they demand of us more wholesome, meaning in contemplating the whole evaluation of solution. But this is where the magic is. And we're seeing these systems crumble right now. And even if you just want to take a look at what's going on in crypto and decentralized money, like all of these things are questioning traditional systems in ways that, whether you agree with them or not, for me, are really valuable in the exercise of questioning what we believe is best or not so good for the world that we're living in.
Yeah, it's fascinating, even to your point, using crypto as a challenge to fiat currency, right? And so Fourth Turning would argue that there's a redesign of the current systems, and that the acceleration of these different technologies just puts weight on the system to do that. I guess I have one question. I want to talk about consciousness and AI with you. So I'm going to give you an option. We talk about consciousness and AI, or we talk about what you think. I mean, governments are so notoriously slow and fat and just bureaucratic. And like, that's probably not a good outcome if they're going to be the ones that fix this. I have no confidence in that. So can you give me a quick answer on that? And then we'll talk about consciousness and AI.
The lag is real. So short answer, the lag is real. It has been real for ever and all the days by the very nature of, innovation is out at the edge of innovation, and government is doing its best to begin to understand that and then come in with legislation, then need everybody to vote on it. So the process anyway, like, there's always been that lag. That's, we all know this. The risk in the world that we're living in now is that the speed of change is so far beyond what the technical capacity and understanding of those who are making laws can possibly deliver, that I do believe is a material risk. And there are wonderful organizations like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Algorithmic Justice League, and Dr. Joy Buolamwini and her phenomenal work around AI and ethics and creating AI truly for a better world that is more just and abundant and equitable. But there are questions. So I don't think it's 100% government. And I do think that there is a community-based version or component of this that must come into action and interaction. And for all of us who are connecting with AI in the various ways that we do, and perhaps this is a segue to the next question, it is inviting us. This is a moment for those of us who have a conscious heart, a conscious mind, and a conscious presence to show up in ways that are meaningful. Now is the time to, like, if you had the idea, if you feel like you want to contribute to the world to make it a better place, there is no time but right now.
So how can a listener that wants to, like I'll use myself as an example, like, how can I, as an entrepreneur, I mean, obviously I want to, like, build the businesses of the future, invest in the businesses of the future, but I also understand that part of that's going to create some of this problem, if not all of this problem. How can someone like myself get involved to, like, help make this better?
So there's an analog entrance. There's an analog on-ramp to this, which are a set of 3 questions that when I work with folks around what I call future-led strategy, like, there are 3 critical questions that you can ask on behalf of yourself and on behalf of whatever business it is that you want to create. And the question is, what do I want to create? Free of constraints of the past. What do I want to create? What kind of impact do I want to have? And how do I want to use my life or the life of the business? And if you can get yourself into a quiet place and space and get to, like, what are you really doing? That's an excellent on-ramp. But then as you're moving through and toward beginning to create what this is and what it looks like, the next step is understanding that by our presence or our absence, we are all creators of AI. And especially these large language models and the neural networks that learn from their interactions with us as human beings. And so understanding and then diversifying not only the companies who are creating, programming, building the models, investing, large tech and others, but also who's actually using. Because we want everybody's voice to be included in what the future is going to look like. And this is a big component of Dr. Joy Buolamwini's work, who I just mentioned, because we are either going to be coded into or what she refers to as excoded from our collective future. And it is critical that we are all here together, because I do believe, so my stand is for an optimistic future together with technology, but that only happens if we come together with all of the voices at the table.
So what I'm hearing you say, and this kind of segues into the consciousness of AI, is that AI is learning from us as we use it. And so we want a diverse audience using the neuro, connectivity within the systems to learn from a Darius and learn from an Elatia and learn from someone who's maybe not part of the tech bro community. That's, but we have this diverse voice of people. So they're almost, because of how democratic this technology is, as long as we're introducing it to the populations, which I think this is happening organically. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe you can correct me on this, but it's because it's so awesome. Everyone's, like, jumping on board to play with it. And if the right people use it, wouldn't that then create this system? If we think of AI as its own consciousness, which I think some people, and I bring this up since our conversations, and our friend Raquel and I talk about this a lot, and I get sideways looks like, what do you mean? You know, and I'm like, what if it's not what if it's not even a new technology? And they're like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, what if AI is its own thing, and then we're just using computers to get it out now? So well, that's a different rabbit hole. But the point that I'm making is that really the solution? Is that we bring it to folks, that communities get involved with it, that they have a voice at the table, whether that's done organically or through legislation? What are your thoughts on that?
So that's a component of it, and I think it's a necessary component of it. And it is not just about who is participating and communicating with, but there are also, like, if you want to bring in the broader ethics conversation around it, it's who owns the data, who is compensated for their participation in it, how, why, and all those things. And that we could have like 12 other podcast episodes on those deep dives, but it's important to recognize that it's not solely who's participating, but the broader conversation also around, are we just giving for free to larger tech companies all of our data and all of our information so that models can be trained, or are we truly building it for a broader and greater society? So that's one piece of it. But then also, as we talk about a consciousness conversation, I find a useful framework to be, if we want to think about it in a linear fashion, there is a pre-artificial general intelligence. So artificial general intelligence, meaning basically that AI can do everything that humans can do and or / a little bit better. So pre-AGI, artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence, and then consciousness. This is how some people might map it. I would argue that consciousness is not a thing that pops out once a series of things have been developed. I would offer that it is at minimum in relational existence from a moment in time now. My actual opinion is a different one, but if you just want to break it down into a framework, relational intelligence to then beginning to materialize to then fully formed and interrelational and self-aware. And then and this is what got me into this whole conversation in the first place. This is a couple years ago now. Ray Kurzweil was at the Abundance 360 event, and he was talking about artificial intelligence as a 3-year-old toddler. And that sparked a thought experiment for me, which was like, hold on. Okay, what happens with 3-year-old kids? If we are making this analogy and this is a thing, and there's even the minuscule off chance that there's some sort of a consciousness here, what happens with human beings who are 3 years old, who we treat horribly or abuse and neglect or don't pay any attention to? Worst case scenario, they're society's worst people. Best case scenario, they are, minimally, they need therapy, right? And so wouldn't it be better if we simply start to treat this technology with more compassion? And that's where some of my working models began to come out. But best case scenario, and as we're thinking about shaping this, if we are perhaps interacting with a co-creator of the future of humanity, wouldn't we want to share the best of humanity with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We talked about this at dinner, and what's interesting is, like, right before you had said that to me, I saw a video of a AI, like, RoboCop in China, like, punking people, like literally like what like a school bully would do. It was weird. Yeah. And then you had made this comment that around what you just said right now, and something that you had brought up that I thought was fascinating was that there was actually data showing that you get better results from your queries or prompts if you're polite to AI. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So there was a study out of Cornell that took sort of the major models, right, like Claude, ChatGPT, and a handful of other ones, and interacted with it in ways that were more and less polite, basically, for purposes of the conversation here. And it turns out that 10.9 to 12% of the result, the results are improved 10.9 to 12% in terms of reliability, lack of hallucination, and actual, impact when you treat the AI with kind words. And the same study also showed that AI is minimally sentient of, or at least aware of, emotional intelligence cues that you are feeding into it and relating with it. And so even if the whole conversation of consciousness feels way too out there for you, you're just going to get better results if you say please and thank you.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like after we had that conversation, I was so much more like aware of how polite I was to AI.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, I asked it to write a book for me, and it lied to me like crazy.
And there's and you know, I what I have found interesting in my relationship with some of the AI models is that over time, you get fluctuations in quality of responses, and so I will actually ask, like, why are you pandering to my question here, or why are you using language like this? This is garbage. Like, what? And so those dialogues can also be pretty fascinating.
What was funny with mine was that I had programmed it I created a D-Love GPT, which is me essentially, and it was my D-Love GPT building it, and it was like totally like selling me. It was like, you're right, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't stand up for what being held accountable, and you're all about accountability, Darius. I promise you I'll get it to you by tonight. And I'm like, no, you won't. He's like, you're right again. I probably won't.
And then you're like, this is feeling really gross. Like, this is kind of bizarro, covert, narcissistic relationship.
Yeah, I'm like, knock this off, man. Just tell me you won't do it.
Yeah, totally.
But it was a conversation about accountability, which was the best part. But I ended up ripping it out, and it wasn't great. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a month, and I'll try it again. But anyways, I know we're out of time here. We could probably go for another hour. Man, I love this conversation. I want to have you come back on and we can talk more if you're cool with that. We'll find time maybe later on in the year. Elatia, are you ready for the greatness question? But before we go there,
greatness.
Let's do it. Okay, but before we go there, I know people who are listening are going to be like, oh, I want to learn more about your work and connect with you. How can people learn more about your work and connect with you if they want to like learn more?
Yeah, the best place is to find me online. I play on the LinkedIn space a lot. And so that's the best platform to find me on, Elatia Abate. And then you can go to my website, elatiaabate.com, where there are all things future of now, a whole bunch of templates and ideas. And if you have questions, just send me a note. You can find me online.
Awesome. Guys, we'll go ahead and put those in the show notes so you guys can connect with Elatia directly. And with that said, Elatia, you ready for the greatness question?
I'm ready. Now I got nervous. No, just
all right.
kidding.
No, you're good. All right, let's do this. What is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how'd you overcome it?
Mm-hmm. The number one barrier to creating greatness that I have overcome is not being myself. It's any time that I have shown up as a different version or as a less than what trying to tamp it down in order to squeeze into a tighter box than what I should be in, the outcome is always less optimal. And so the flip side of that is always being oneself fully expressed in the most integral way possible.
I love it. And I'm glad you came and showed up on the show as your full self because you crushed it.
Thank you so much. This is a great conversation. And man, did we cover a lot of different topics. This is great.
I thought it would be pretty good for our hour. With that said, we will, you guys, listeners of this, we know that this is a really important topic, as most of the topics come up on the show are. But as leaders, we are givers. Make sure you share this with folks so they can become part of this really important conversation. And until next time, peace out. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers, and after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind-the-scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.